Yeah, I've been a police officer for 19 years. Prior to that, I was a dispatcher for 7 years. Took a bad call involving a kid with a double homicide and an officer-involved shooting. Next 911 call came in. My daughter, who was 10 months old, was seizing. I was stuck in the dispatch center because we were down to shift minimum. Had to call someone in order to get to the hospital. She ended up being okay. Fast forward, come home after being at the hospital, and that's when the nightmares started. I would have nightmares about this little boy, and we're talking this happened in 2004. There was no mental health help. At least it wasn't talked about. When I did go to someone and say I was having these nightmares, that maybe you're just not cut out for this job. A couple years later, I became a police officer, and there were some, issues in my marriage, and the fact that I never really dealt with the trauma from that night, the mom guilt I had from not being there for my daughter during that time, I think really piled on a lot of the issues within our household. So we decided to get a divorce. The first night that I had to come home to an empty house was the night that everything just kind of hit me all at once. I was at that point feeling like a failure of a mom, feeling like I was a failure as a wife. Went through my shift that evening. I was talking to another officer, and he picked up on me saying throughout the night, I just don't want to go home to an empty house. I came home and decided to take a fifth of alcohol, took a couple shots, decided, forget this, and started downing the whole fifth. Then I started writing a letter to my daughter, apologizing to her. I actually put my Glock in my mouth, and at that point, the officer from earlier sent me a text message saying, hey, how you doing? Checking up on me, because he caught on to what I was saying, which that made me put it down, text him back saying, not so good. He called me and he kept me on the phone until he came over, hid my gun, told me to get my butt to bed, and stayed there until he made sure that I wasn't coming back down or wouldn't find my gun. I thought that that was the worst moment of my life, to the point that I was going to take my own life. And then what I usually tell people is God and the universe said, hold my beer, because that definitely was not the worst point of my life. And this is only about 2.5 years ago when my son-in-law decided to kill himself, and then 5 weeks later, my brother died. This time I did different things. There were a few things that I had to do after my son-in-law killed himself, and it was by gunshot, and it was in the backyard. Me being the first responder in my family, thought I could do this. I can distance myself from the situation and clean up the mess. The different thing that I did this time is I sent a text message to 4 people that I consider my close friends and peer support, and one of them being a mental health clinician, and let them know, like, hey, right now I'm doing okay, but I just want to let you know what I just had to do. In case someone gets a 2 a.m. phone call, please answer. And then 5 weeks later is my brother got sick, and it was very sudden. He was extremely healthy before, didn't have any kinds of issues, got COVID, and within 5 weeks was gone. All along the way, those people continually reached out to me. I continually reached out to them. I oversee our critical incident stress management team in the county. I actually called my other team leaders and said, hey, even though I know I can do it, for the next 3 months, I'm not going on any call outs. I started to learn I need to start practicing what I preach to people. I talked to my peer support people, allowing them to take care of me, and I started getting a massage every month. Just something where I can take the time to, I used to always think that this was kind of foo-foo-y, but be in the moment. And the whole mindfulness thing I used to think was like, okay, yeah, that sounds nice and fluffy, until you actually start practicing it and you're like, there is actually something to this. I see a mental health clinician that deals specifically with first responders, and she's amazing. And she's also on the Ohio Assist team, and I see her every month. So I have definitely seen a lot of change in actually going and seeing a mental health clinician. I take time away to be by myself, to do things every day. One of my non-negotiable things that I do is I go outside. And so every evening I am sitting outside in my backyard. You know, even if it's raining, I'll sometimes sit there. We have a little overhang so I can actually sit outside. I think a lot of times when you start going down that hole and you have your mind made up of what you are going to do, in the background there is something that is just screaming that you want someone to come and help them. In the back of my mind, I was just screaming like, would somebody just ask me how I was doing or help?
Going back to the original incident, at any point were you upset, angry, frustrated with that other officer?
For reaching out and helping me? No, I was actually more grateful than anything. I'm glad he still picked up on, I was having issues with going home to an empty house that night, that he kind of figured. And yeah, I'm more than anything grateful for him and what he did. Like I wouldn't be here. You know, my daughter would be really messed up. My ex-husband would probably be really messed up. A lot of loved ones in my life would probably be really messed up had I completed suicide. You're definitely not alone. You're definitely not the only one who has ever thought this way or whoever will think this way in the future. You're not going crazy. I mean, most of the things that we see or we go through, the normal person doesn't see and the normal person doesn't go through. So, you know, the fact that we're still here and living now, even if you're having some of those thoughts, you are far more resilient than your average civilian because we see more, we hear more, we smell more, you know, we experience more. So I would say you're not alone and there is absolutely no shame in reaching out. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to a clinician, that's fine. There's peer support all over the state of Ohio. There's peer support all over our nation that, you know, at least in Ohio, we have privileged communications, so we can't tell anyone anything. You know, if you say you're suicidal or whatever, we're gonna lead you to help and go with you and help you get through that, but at least reach out, you know, and there's no shame in talking. That's actually probably the best thing you can do is find someone you trust and talk to someone.